One of the most powerful gifts we can ever give ourselves is to start creating a new foundation that I am moving beyond survival of the fittest into survival of the kindest. That is the essence of abundance. It's not a belief, it's a way of life. It's just the way that we choose to weave in this world. Welcome to the Deja Blu podcast, where we believe that living a life of magic can be the default. Join us each week as we playfully and authentically dive into the mysteries of life and explore what it truly means to be human. From spirituality, wellness, and all things taboo, we don't hold anything back. So without further ado, let's let the magic unfold. Hello, beautiful humans, and welcome back to another episode of the Deja Blu podcast. It has been a hot minute. In fact, about 8 weeks since I last recorded an episode. We took the summer off for some sacred structure and some recalibration behind the scenes because the podcast is growing at a rate that I didn't anticipate for sure when I first started making the podcast in my backyard in a rickety old shed at the Mother Tree. And for all of those of you that have been on this journey with me since the beginning, you'll know what I'm talking about. And now we are in a fully established, dialed-in set with a whole team of epic humans behind the scenes that are supporting in creating this content. In addition to that, the amount of resources that go in to creating such high-quality content, and time and energy and blood, sweat, and tears. And so there is always going to be moments and seasons where I go back behind the scenes and make sure that I'm crossing all of my T's and dotting all of my I's. And this is when I call myself Blue-Daddy, because I'm tapping into my masculine structure and making sure that I'm taking care of business to ensure that the containers that I'm building don't have any holes in them, so that when the energy is poured in, it's not leaking everywhere. So it's a constant check-in, and the podcast is no exception. So that's what we've been doing behind the scenes. And then I feel a little bit of nerves to start this episode, because once I've sort of broken the momentum of creating content every single week or a couple of times a week, I get a little bit more nervous. And so I'm coming back at this episode with my heart pounding a little bit. I did chop off all my hair as well, so I've got this fresh wave of energy. And not only am I hard of hearing, but my eyesight isn't great either. So I also have got myself a new pair of glasses, which helps me read my prompts of what I'm going to talk about today. So first and foremost, before I go into the topics today, I just want to say big, fat thank you to each and every one of you for listening, for tuning in, for sharing. I am almost on a daily basis completely blown away by the impact that is being made. We have about 1 million listeners every month, which is mind-blowing. I remember my first prayer with the podcast, which is, if this podcast is only heard by 2 people, that is already enough, because that is not the why behind this podcast. It's not for me to build as big of an audience as possible. It's really an opportunity for me to just have a verbal diary of an outlet of all of the insights and the things that are moving through me. And may this be an opportunity to have an outlet so that the energy can keep flowing, as opposed to sort of getting full and then not having anywhere to express. So that was the intention for the podcast, was medicine for me to have a verbal diary to be able to express my heart and what is present for me. And I feel like I've blinked and we're like 3 years later, we've got 1 million listeners every month. And it's just kind of a shock, and also simultaneously it's inviting me into a deeper level of responsibility, the ability to respond. If we break that word down, I have a responsibility now that people are actually paying attention and listening. A responsibility instead of when I first started the podcast, and it was beautiful. It was sort of in my maiden and just saying whatever it was that was on my heart, and not really having much discernment, and not really understanding boundaries, and just kind of just winging it, you know? And now it's got to the point where I've realized that as the platform grows, as the audience gets bigger, you're also opening up more people to disagree with you and not like what you have to say and project and also give great feedback. But the more people that are engaged, the more opening for all different walks of life and all different perspectives will present themselves. And so this is also an important part of it, and something that I'm learning every single day. And so I'm going to go into just some revelations around what this podcast has brought into my life, the things that I have learned from this podcast, and the ways and the tools and the tips to navigate being a outward-facing figure, I guess. I guess that's what I am now. Some people have called me an influencer. I've never really resonated with that term, but I guess I am. If you're influencing humans, then I guess you become an influencer. And so I guess that's what I am now, even though in the past I've always called it an influence. Ugh. Because most of us out there aren't really influencing anything that's really going to be of benefit. Most influencers are selling their platform for the next highest bidder who's willing to sponsor them. And not everybody. However, it's really important of what are we actually influencing, and is it going to improve the well-being of our lives individually, the health of our bodies, mind and spirit, as well as the planet and how we are consuming on the planet. And so I've made a commitment moving forward with the podcast that I will not be sponsored by any brands that I don't believe in my whole heart and soul is actually benefiting us as individuals and us as a collective for the planet. So with that being said, specifically for those that are the Deja Blu fans and listeners, I am taking things to the next level with the podcast around sustainability. So to create complete transparency, ever since the podcast has developed into more of a professional front, aka all the cameras, breaking away from Synarchy Media, who were producing my podcast, with incredible job, and taking things into my own hands, building out the set, having the actual studio. The cost of running a podcast is no joke. There are editing, there are production, there's a producer, there's filming, there's creative direction, there's website, there's all of them, album art, timestamps. I mean, it's just so much work goes into podcasting, and nobody really tells you this, right? When I started the podcast, I just started with a hand-me-down mic, and my friend showed me how to work GarageBand, which is a free app on an Apple laptop. And I just put in a little intro, put in a little outro, did everything myself, and there was no production cost. But then once it started becoming video, and it started becoming high quality content, and then it started becoming thumbnails and Instagram reels and all the things and the captions, and there is a lot that goes in behind the scenes towards podcasting. In addition to that, I have been doing all of this on free platforms. All of this I have made completely 100% available for everybody. I wanted to create an inclusivity in the podcast and the nature of it, that this information or this wisdom or whatever it is that's shared with the guests or whatever it is that they're sharing on the podcast, that it's available to everybody, no matter where we are at in our journey of being human. In addition to that, just like I said, in full transparency, the amount of resources it costs to actually run the podcast was not very sustainable for me. And I started to get feeling like I was like running dry. Like every single penny I was making was just going right back into the podcast. And so it was this like constant loop. And of course, that's the path of devotion. That's what it takes up front, is that there isn't going to be an audience up front. It's going to be something that's built. Now, I didn't expect the podcast to get to where it is. And I'm so deeply, deeply grateful and do not take this responsibility lightly, while also at the same time keeping it very light, and so what I've really had to do over this last six or 7 weeks is to come back to the drawing board of how to create sustainability with the podcast. How can I actually do this where I'm not having to just give every single thing that I'm making back into this creation to continue to create free content, and to recognize I'm being of service, but I'm actually not honoring myself in the motion of it, while also it's my highest excitement and my greatest joy and something that is so deeply dear to my heart. And so I have been in the inquiry of how I can best navigate this in a win-win-win situation. And of course, that means bringing sponsors onto the podcast. Up until this point, the only things that I have been mentioning or sponsoring has been my own programs, whether it's Fluorescence with Reggie or the Fluorescent Sisterhood or whatever it is that I've mentioned, has all just been sort of organic things that are happening behind the scenes with what we are creating and just opening that door and sharing it. So for me to create sustainability with the podcast, I get to start bringing on sponsors. And of course, I've listened to many other podcasts, Tim Ferriss, Aubrey Marcus, Andre, with the Know Thyself podcast. There's many podcasters that I'm surrounded by, and they all use sponsors. And I have always felt very uncomfortable or awkward around sponsorships, because I feel like reading anything from a script is going to be that you're getting a cardboard cutout version of Blue. And that's nothing that I ever want to offer. Authenticity, vulnerability, transparency is something so important to me and is something so magnetic in the people that I choose to surround myself with, that I would never want to sacrifice that in the name of just churning out content so that it can be sustainable. I want to create a win-win-win where authenticity, transparency, vulnerability reign, while also sponsorships of only brands, like I said at the beginning, brands or companies that I believe in with my whole heart and soul, that either A, I use their products on a daily basis that enhance my life, or B, they are supporting the planet at large to create practical solutions or things that can support us with thriving as being human on planet Earth. So, with that being said, we are bringing sponsors onto the podcast. And they will be in the health and wellness space and products that I believe in. So this is going to be a way of continuing to support the podcast to be a thing, not just for 1 or 2 years, but to actually be able to be a project that's a life's work, not just a season. And that's really important to me. And so I am devoted. I'm committed. I've got to learn so much of myself, of my ability to show up for years straight to something that I have never done before in the past. The only other thing that I have shown up for years straight to sustain the well-being of is my dog and myself. I do not have any children. I am not married. I don't own a home. I don't have massive responsibilities outside of sustaining and making sure that I'm okay and taken care of, that my family are doing well, that my friends are loved and cherished and cared for, and my dog stays alive, really. But we're doing that fine. She's thriving. We're rocking 11 and a half years in. She's sitting right by my feet right now. And so I have been able to meet myself through this creation of this podcast where I can actually create something sustainable that can last even when I'm not present, even when I'm not sharing. People are watching it while I'm asleep. It becomes an asset and it creates its own consciousness and it goes where it needs to go and it finds the ears and the hearts of those who are ready and aligned with the message, that can absorb the wisdom, absorb the inspiration, absorb the insights into our own experience, and therefore shift how we make our decisions into 1 degree at least closer to a deeper place of empowerment. So just so you know, this is what's going to be moving forward, is we're going to be bringing sponsors onto the podcast, and something that I really believe in, because I believe that there's a gene key. It talks about heart marketing. When you really believe in something, it holds a certain charge that you're not selling anything. You're opening a door of an opportunity for other people to learn about it. And that is my intention with the sponsorship. So what I am asking for in return from hundreds of episodes that I have churned out over the years for free for all of you is the support from you with the sponsorship moving forward, and a deeper understanding of why I've chosen to start bringing sponsors onto the podcast, so that Blu can actually receive from this creation as well as pour everything into it. So that is one piece being said. Also, I don't usually do my podcast with my laptop sitting on my lap. If you're listening to the episode, then you won't notice, but if you're watching the episode on YouTube, I am reading from my laptop because I did a little Q&A on my Instagram of anybody that felt anything that they wanted me to discuss on today's episode. I have noticed that the solo episodes are the things that you really enjoy. And for season 2, it was predominantly just interviewing guests, brilliant minds that have inspired me and activated me in my own path, my own way of weaving in the world. And so I've had the joy of being able to share those humans with you. And in addition to that, season 1 was predominantly my own journey and my own story. And so a lot of the feedback I was receiving was that we miss you, Blu. We miss your insights and the way that you perceive reality and how you see the world and how you weave through the world. And so I'm going to be sharing more solo episodes with you. So this will be an opportunity if you're going on a walk with your dog, or you're hanging out in your room and you're just chilling and you get to pop your headphones in and listen to a podcast, that I become a friend that is in your pocket and someone that you can just listen to while you are creating or going about your day or driving to work, as somebody that you can tune into and just get a little pocket friend. So a little pocket Bluey at your service. Hello, everybody. So somebody asked me on Instagram, what does it look like to build your team rooted in synergy, integrity, transparency, and equality? And that's something that I have been doing recently, is that I have broken away from Synarchy Media, being the producers of the podcast. What I mean by breaking away from Synarchy Media is the opportunity for me to hire my friends as well as my sisters and also some graduates from the fluorescence program that are in the fluorescence sisterhood that have the skill sets of what it is that I need. And so I have hired a new editor, Nicolette, who is magical being. And while you're editing this, hi Nicolette. And we got Bernadette here in the set, who's a dear sister and just like an ally and just an incredible woman that has shown up time and time again from a deep place of integrity, that is now also supporting me with filming and just also the in-between moments where I sit down with her and I just flesh out, okay, these are my ideas and this is what I'm going through, and I'm open to reflections, and just like people that I trust that can see things that maybe I don't see and give me an opportunity to meet myself in a deeper way through a deeper level of integrity and compassion. And we've got Amy, who's producing the podcast as well as my personal brand. We've got Lily, who is in creative directing of the podcast and building out the websites and the visuals and all of the good stuff. Now, what this means going in behind the scenes is the amount of work of training of each position, of making sure that we're all on the same page, of getting into a place of Synarchy, which for me is beyond, or is an evolved version of hierarchy. Now, old paradigm, old epoch, or not old epoch, but the sort of the older ways of doing things, or the outdated ways of doing things, from my perspective, that there is one person at the top barking orders down to the rest. There is no personal relationship. There's not really a deep connection. There's not much empathy or compassion. It's more so, we got to get the job done. These are the skill sets they need to get the job done with. And outside of that, there's not really much of a personal connection. Now, I've been in many jobs and many experiences where that has been the case, where I have been working for others that sort of, there is not an equality. I am the assistant. I am the producer, but I am not the boss, and I don't really have a personal character within the space. Now, within those kind of spaces, I felt like my soul was being sucked dry. I didn't feel like I was being honored or celebrated for my uniqueness, and I realized later that it was my uniqueness that became my superpower. And it's recognizing everybody has a uniqueness, everybody has a fingerprint, everybody has a unique contribution that nobody else can do on this planet. Now, being in sort of spaces like that my job position could get replaced in a heartbeat. And because I wasn't bringing my uniqueness to the table, I was just more so like in an ice cube tray and just like a carbon copy version of a ghost of Blue, who Blue could potentially be. And so as now stepping into a position of leadership within my own little microcosm of a team, my intention is to move from domination model into the Synarchy. And what I mean by Synarchy is more so like we weave like a shoal of fish or like a beehive. We all have a job and a responsibility to create something together, and also to take care of each other and to have each other's backs. Now, the challenge with this that I have found is that beautiful blurry line between professionalism and personal life. And specifically when you have a team full of women, we are all connected to our emotions. And when the moon is showing her full face here, we're all bleeding, we're going to be feeling it. And there's going to be some clearing conversations, and there's going to be like not getting a text back is a personal thing, and now we have to clear that. And like there's many different layers to navigating the balance between professionalism and personal life. And my mum once told me, never become friends with the people you employ. Now, I have taken that piece of guidance or advice, and I have done the complete opposite. I am friends with every single person that I employ. I have like a very deep heart connection center. And I personally am learning the professional relationship. So for example, the other day, there was something that really triggered me, and I was like all flustered by it and annoyed. And I directly went to my one of the people that work with me, and I realized that actually I have other friends outside of my work dynamics that I could have like just expressed my frustration with and just be witnessed and met in that space. But because there was a work relationship, I kind of crossed the boundary of professionalism into personal and made the line really blurry. And so I took full ownership of that and I was like, okay, cool. Lesson learned. How I usually learn is by touching the stove, learning that it's hot, and then realizing next time it's hot, I don't touch it again. That's usually the predominant way of how I learn. And so instead of shaming or guilting myself for learning these things in those moments, I just adjust the sails and continue to move forward and see how we can evolve as a team. But how I like to see it in one of analogies, I can't remember, I think it was Bernadette actually that said it on the team call the other day. I love it when you speak in analogies. It helps everything make more sense. Was it you or Kyle? Kyle, okay. One of the analogies that's really helped me around teamwork is that we are sort of like dough, like of a bread, but the dough hasn't been cooked yet. And for the bread to actually rise in the oven, you can't have air pockets in it. So what the responsibility is to knead out the air pockets of the dough. And then eventually when you put the dough in the oven, the bread rises and it rises into its fullness. And that's how I like to visualize the team. There are always going to be air pockets. It's not an if. We're not trying to avoid air pockets at all costs. It's just a when. When it shows up, do we have a formula that allows us to ensure that everybody feels respected, seen, honored, and held, while simultaneously moving the resistance, the tension, or the story we've told ourselves around what is, so that we can knead out the air pocket and continue to allow the project or whatever it is that we're creating together to rise. And that is the most important thing. And so we have formulas around clearing. We made an agreement that we do not go to other people when we have a challenge with somebody, like a trigger point. So for example, there's 5 people in the team. I'm having a challenge with somebody that is in the team, but I don't go directly to them. I go to somebody else in the team and I talk about them behind their back. Now, what we're doing is we're leaking the energy. The container is no longer solid. We have a hole in the ship and it's going to take on water if we don't address it. And the longer it goes, the more water it takes on. Think about it from an energetic position. So the most important thing, the commitment that we have made, is that we go directly to the source of the trigger as fast as possible, as long as we have allowed ourselves to sit with it, to integrate it, to understand what our story is. Now, another piece here is the language that we use. Instead of coming out from the finger being pointed out and the blame and the shame, this is rooted in somebody has to be right and somebody has to be wrong. Can we ask questions to learn everybody's story involved in the subjective matter? So to address a clearing conversation, it's going directly to the person once I've rested in the truth of what it is that I'm experiencing, and to express my story around what is. Now, what that's doing is it's taking full ownership of the trigger. As Adria Becker always has told me, trust the trigger to teach. It's the 5 T's. Your trigger is your teacher. It's an amazing guide. It's an opportunity to highlight and pinpoint the areas where we have a lack of awareness or we don't have a full understanding or integration of our wisdom yet on a somatic level. And so the trigger is here showing us something. When we blame the other person for the trigger, we give, consciously or unconsciously, our power away to do anything about it. We don't actually have the power to shift it within our bodies because it's caused by something external. Now, the external person, what they said, did, or didn't do, may have been the thing that pushed the trigger, but the trigger comes from within. So when we address the conversation of my story around what happened is, this is such a powerful place to come at it from a humble understanding and a willingness to learn, recognizing we only have 180 of the experience. We only see 180 of the side. When we actually are listening to the other person's story around what happened, we start to get the 360 perspective. Once we start to get the 360 perspective, it softens our body into a deeper place of compassion. And now when that person is sharing, our intention is to listen, to understand, not listen to respond. Because if you're listening to respond, you're not actually listening to what they've got to say. And what we want to do is take our individual identity out of the situation and not really feel or allow ourselves to feed into the story that it's so personal, and to understand what the other person is seeing and the story they're telling themselves, so that we can actually clear the subjective space that we've projected our fears into the middle of it, clear that space so that we can actually create a deeper level of intimacy. Now, if you break the word intimacy down, it's into me you see. Intimacy or into me you see is an opportunity to share with that other person your personal experience without shaming or guilting them, transcending that there is a right and a wrong way of doing things, and recognizing that it's just my truth and your truth, and how can we meet in the middle to deepen our connection moving forward. So this is what it means for me to knead out an air pocket. Now I can tell you, or share with you, but I have had my fair share of clearing conversations. Oh my goodness, I seem to trigger the fuck out of people. and I'm here for it, because a lot of The feedback that has been rooted in compassion has been incredible opportunities for growth around blind spots that I wasn't aware of. Damn, I'm human. I'm figuring it out every single day. I don't know the truth. I don't know the way. I don't know why we're fully here. I don't really fully get it. I'm not sitting on a stage and a podium telling you all why you're alive, what to do, and how to navigate this human experience. The podcast is rooted in my own personal experience while simultaneously being a student every single day, and I mess up too. I'm figuring it out. I fall over, I graze my knee, I have my friend to pick me up, to brush me off, and to move forward with a little bit deeper discernment and awareness around how to navigate the walk so that I don't fall again on the same thing. So it's so easy to place a pedestal towards anybody that is well articulated, rooted in a deep philosophical perspective on reality. Just because I have been given a gift in this life to articulate myself in a certain way does not mean that I am A, better, B, got anything figured out that you don't, C, have the answers. And I think that anybody that actually poses to have all of the answers, for me, that's a red flag. We are in the school of being alive and being human. And that is my intention for the podcast, is to just be a place where we can go, I'm not alone in asking the deeper questions, in wanting to understand the human optimization or the potential of what it means to be alive. I'm not alone in recognizing that we're floating on a giant rock hurling through space at millions of miles an hour, held into orbit by a giant ball of fire. And I look up at the stars at night and I wonder, why am my emotions so ruled by this giant illuminated thing that we call the moon? There are deeper things that are going on this planet. And I think that for me, navigating this in a way where I don't feel crazy anymore because I found like-minded individuals that share a similar perspective, and I'm open to hearing their perspective while listening to the discernment of what actually feels true to me. So one of my teachers once said that I don't know what the truth is, but I know what love feels like, and I follow that every single day. And that has been one of my greatest guides, that sentence. I don't know what the truth is, but I know what love feels like, and I follow that every single day. That has been something that has really supported me in navigating through this weird human experience. And recognizing that actually love is the one thing that feels like the most at home, and yet is also sometimes the hardest thing to allow myself to get to, because judgment, gossip, fear, division is a very magnetic energy that can easily be pulled into. Ever been in a space where somebody comes into the room and is gossiping about somebody, and you can feel yourself being pulled into it, and then after the conversation you feel like you need to take a shower because it's yucky? That's energetic hygiene. And there is a discernment around what we feed into with our energetic hygiene. Recognizing that there is a sort of a vibration to everything. If you look at anything solid under a microscope, a strong enough microscope, you'll see that it's actually a bunch of molecules that are vibrating at a certain frequency that is holding it, depending whether it's a liquid or it's a solid, or if it's gas, it vibrates at a different frequency. Well, same within humans. There are certain people that we experience that feel really good to our nervous system, that feel like home, that feel like a sense of, oh, I know this person. Even though in this physical flesh puppet, I've not only just met them, but my body, my soul remembers them. I have a feeling, I can feel it. It's a remembrance. It's a softening of my being. It's a calming of my nervous system. It's a deep relaxation in their presence. I feel loved. I feel seen. I feel cherished. We'll follow that feeling. And then on the opposite side of that, there are people that we come in contact with that people have said lovely things about them and they look lovely and they're saying all the right things, but something in my body is going, no. Something that doesn't make logical sense because it hasn't happened yet. But there is such a thing as intuition that we don't feed enough. But when we listen to our intuition and then we take action, aligned action from our intuition gets stronger. So this is when we can start to be guided by, I don't know what the truth is, but I know what love feels like, because I've allowed myself to let love in and let love out enough to know the difference between the fear frequency and between the love frequency. And how can I start actually being ruled by that? And I've started learning that there's something that Richard Rudd said on an Instagram live that I did with Zach Bush and Richard Rudd that really stuck with me. It really impacted me. Was that we are transcending the experience of survival of the fittest. Now, I'm sure everybody listening to this has heard that term at least once in their life, survival of the fittest. Well, to me, survival of the fittest implies that I'm going to push anybody down that's not as fit as me, and I'm going to move myself up some sort of invisible ladder of a hierarchy system to get me to the top so that I can be better than everybody else. This is rooted in separation, this is rooted in division, and this is not the frequency that we're going to move into the new earth with. This is impossible. There's no way we're going to evolve as a species if that is the foundation of the way that we weave ourselves through this world. Now, what he said, we're actually moving into the epoch of survival of the kindest. That hit me like a ton of bricks, in a very kind, soft way, of course. That really reminded me, specifically somebody that's lived in community for the past 7 years. We thrive in community because we take care of each other. We thrive in community because when there's dishes in the sink, instead of being like, well, these aren't my dishes, so I'm going to leave them, recognizing this is my house and my intention is for it to feel good. So I'm going to clean the dishes and I'm going to love doing it. Survival of the kindest ensures that when you take somebody else's dog out for a walk because they needed to and that person was at work, and you just send them a message, just so you know, babe, I fed the dog, I took the dog out for a walk, so when you come home, all is well. That little seed planted places a piece in their consciousness, a little seed in their consciousness that goes, that woman has my back and I have hers. So, for example, when I need to go to the airport and get dropped off at the airport, I have an abundance of people that will be willing to take me and happily take me to the airport. And I, in fact, even use the word, it's my honor to take you to the airport. I'm the hero. Like, going to the airport, you got some good karma. If you are picking up your friends and dropping your friends off at the airport, specifically if you live in Los Angeles, it is a jungle down there. You've seen how many cars in one place and everybody is in a rush because everybody's on a time frame? It is not a fun experience dropping off and picking people up at the airport. However, those that do that, I believe, have got really solid friend karma. But this is going back to the original point of survival of the kindest. To genuinely recognize that giving and receiving is the same energy, because when you give, you are saying to the vibrational reality, which is just merely responding to everything you're emitting, that you are abundant enough to give. So, of course, if you're saying to the universe, I'm abundant, then you are abundant and things will happen. And I'm not just talking about financial prosperity. I'm talking about abundance of when you're going through a grief-stricken moment, you have a friend that's there. I'm talking about abundance that when you wake up in the middle of the night and you're hungry, there's food in the fridge. I'm talking about abundance that when you are going on a hike, there's a hummingbird that just so happens to hum right into the middle of your path and looks you dead in the eye, and you know exactly in that moment that's a message from spirit. I'm talking about abundance that when you walk into the grocery store, all of a sudden you feel an immense amount of joy for absolutely no apparent reason, just for the mere gift of being alive. That is the essence of abundance, and that is byproduct of giving without attachment to receive in return. No longer keeping tabs. It's not a belief. It's a way of life. It's just the way that we choose to weave in this world. Because recognizing that actually this is one of the most powerful gifts we can ever give ourselves is to start creating a new foundation that I am moving beyond survival of the fittest into survival of the kindest. Watch how that works for you. I promise you. I promise you. If you just start applying it for the next day and start seeing how it works out for you, then another day, you're at a coffee shop and all of a sudden you feel an immense amount of love, and you decide to pay it forward for the person behind you without even needing credit. You don't need to tell the world that you did it. Don't be posting that on the gram and be like, hey, look at me. I just paid it forward. I'm such a brilliant human. Now everybody externally validate that I'm a brilliant human. Just rest in your heart to know that you did it and you don't need to be acknowledged for it. That is your trust in something much greater that will continue to plant seeds into your reality, or plant people, situations, or experiences into your reality that feel good for you. We are interconnected. This is why at Burning Man, it's such a powerful experiment I have found being at Burning Man, is that it's based off of a gifting economy. And so the gifting economy is that everybody is invited to bring a gift. What is your contribution? Now, being a part of any ecosystem, any small group, if you come in with the mindset, what can I contribute, as opposed to what can I get from this experience, I assure you abundance in that experience. So when you go to Burning Man, for example, because it's gifting economy, everybody's gifting, there's no money there, there's no exchange in that sense. The only thing exchange is what can I contribute? There is like this essence of abundance that fills the space. on a microcosm, for example, the Burning Man experience, or just the microcosm of living with friends. I personally I'm so privileged and blessed to be able to live with 3 other incredible, remarkable women that we really have each other's backs. And we've made an agreement that whenever any of us are not in the space, we only speak highly of that person. We do not leak the energy of this container. We all come from the mindset of what can I contribute to this house to make this house feel as best and as inviting to the beautiful guests that we have to come over. How can it be as inviting that we wake up in the morning and we go into the kitchen and our heart lights up to see one of our roommates? It allows our nervous system to relax and to rest. Because there is absolutely no way that we are going to make a lasting impression or genuinely create an impact into the global health and the evolution of our species and our consciousness if we're not doing it in a microcosm moment. If we are talking ill about the people behind our backs that we actually do really care about, or we feel jealous and so we whisper into that other person's ear, or we constantly are keeping tabs around giving and receiving, or we are continuing to root our belief in the survival of the fittest and pushing other people down so that we can get to the top. How on earth are we going to see a healing of our species if we are not implementing these micro moments, these micro realizations and revelations into our community and the way that we speak to ourselves? Gandhi once said that the only way that we're actually going to ripple a change into the world is first it starts with self, then it ripples into our blood family, then it ripples into the community, and then it ripples into the world. We cannot skip a stage. And I truly believe that. I do actually really believe that that is truth. And so I have really been utilizing that and reflecting on how can I continue to infuse healing, compassion, understanding, and insight and embodied wisdom, intuitive wisdom into these areas so that I can actually start to feel energetically that there is high energetic hygiene happening in my personal reality. Because I continue to oscillate back and forth with, I have been given a lot of privilege in this life. I have been given an incredible amount of privilege with my upbringing, with my parents, with the love that I have received up until this point that has allowed me to be able to share in this way. So I oscillate back and forth of like, I'm not using my privilege enough. I could be doing more, and kind of beating myself up on my head. But also realizing that with this privilege or with this awareness, if I can just continue to implement it into every single frame that is presented in my awareness. So what I mean by that is that we are in a movie and you are the main role. You are the main character. And every single moment is another scene of the movie that's presented in front of ourselves. What would it look like to whoever is right in front of you in that scene of the movie, you honor them like they are the most important person in the world? That you give them that your undivided attention when you're speaking to them, that you gift them the opportunity to look at you in the eyes, the windows to your soul, that you have an opportunity to implement love into that moment. And if there's anything that needs clearing it in the best formula that you can possibly do, which is what I've shared previously. And continue to implement the kindness into every corner and every aspect, specifically yourself. Because I think that people start looking way more beautiful when I'm starting to be nice to myself in my own thoughts. Directly linked. Like people's faces start glowing with so much beauty radiating out of them when I genuinely have been nice to myself that morning. When I wake up in the morning and I'm feeling happiness for no reason and I start dancing around the room and being silly and playing dress up or whatever it is that I'm doing, all of a sudden now when I'm having a conversation with somebody and it's a work-related question, that person starts to just gleam with beauty. And as Robert Edward Grant, who's a dear friend of mine, who's been on this podcast multiple times, he talks it and calls it the you-inverse. That the universe that we are in, it is a you-in-verse. We see the world as we are. And when we can start being kind towards ourselves and start loving our internal narrative, or start accepting ourselves the way that we are, then people and the world starts to feel a little bit more brighter. And that is the contribution to the collective, because the collective mind, or what we see within our governments, what we see within the wars on the planet, what we see that is going on a collective scale is a byproduct of the collective consciousness. And the collective consciousness is predominantly held in a low frequency pattern, in a fear frequency, through the media, through education, through the news, through the food system. There are so many different pockets that we could break down and bring our awareness into it. Richard talks about divine dissatisfaction. There's so much we could do in the world to make this world a better place that we can get caught in this divine dissatisfaction. And realizing that those bigger things will shift when we as individuals start shifting into a different frequency individually. And frequency being that every single word, every single thought holds a charge, holds a frequency. Every single thing that we eat, every single person we follow on Instagram. Do we feel enriched by their content? Are they inspiring us? Do they invite us to look deeper into ourselves? Or are they feeding more division from a place of keeping up external appearances to prove how rich, how beautiful, how successful I am? Because that holds a charge too. And over time, when we're recognizing that we don't turn the TV on anymore, we don't really watch the news, we watch Instagram stories for the most part. Not everybody listening to this has Instagram, but for the most part, I can say in my reality, I definitely haven't watched the news in God knows how long. I haven't even had a TV. I haven't had a TV for a decade. But I have been watching Instagram stories. I'll be sliding into other people's business like my business, you know? And so what are we doing with that responsibility? What are we doing with that platform? And that was something that I've really been reflecting on since my platform has been growing. When I sit down in my room and I can post something on my story and I see 10,000 people have looked at that story. I haven't left my bloody bedroom. I'm just still sitting here in my pajamas ranting on about some random thing. And 10,000 eyeballs and 10,000 brains have digested what it is that I've said in 10,000 different perspectives of what it is I actually said. Because also there is my intention and then there's also something separate, which is my impact. Now, I am responsible for my intentions. I'm also down to hear the feedback of my impact, but I'm not responsible for the way that you process what it is that I've said. That is your responsibility. Now, I am so open for feedback. There are things that I have said that I have been like, whoopsie, shouldn't have said that online. I have been called forward in some things which I thought was really funny in the moment, and then I got reflected back. Actually, that was probably not the best thing to say. Okay, got it. Like I said before, I'm learning alongside all of you. So my ask, if it's even possible, and if you have, just by listening to the podcast, if you have pedestaled me, if you have placed me in some kind of like place that is higher up in your consciousness, please do myself and yourself the favor of bringing me as an equal that sits by your side. That would really do a deep justice to our connection, whether it is through the podcast and I don't actually know who you are or I don't know you personally, but the connection that has been formed through you tuning into this episode or through the connection that's been formed by you tuning into any of the episodes I've talked about. Please let me sit by your side. Don't let me sit above you. You will free me and you'll free yourself so that our human can actually breathe, so that we can make mistakes and learn from them, because our mistakes are the places where we grow. Not the only place of growth, but a lot of our growth comes from these places, but we need to have the room to make mistakes. Because what I've noticed is that when anyone I have pedestaled in the past, I've placed them in a position, now when they show they're human, because they're already raised up, as above so below, it has to swing deeper and then they become almost like demonic, as opposed to just human figuring out human stuff. So when the pedestal is there and then all of a sudden they do something that's a mistake, boom, in comes the counterculture. They're now out. So that person that was doing something beautiful all of a sudden can't make mistakes and is now placed in this tier that is even below being human and has been now cancelled out, ostracized from society, and never allowed welcome back to the table or have a voice again. Now, there are different degrees to this, of course, right? Each is niche to its own experience, depending on what it is that's been done, for example. However, I have experienced with the platform growing as well, specifically on Instagram, that there's like also a lot of people that are really nasty and mean. And if you want to grow your platform, if you want to have a voice, if you want to build a YouTube, if you want to have a podcast, if you want to do anything that's in the nature of expressing yourself, whether it's through spoken word, poetry, writing a book, doing videos, whatever it is that's actually outwardly expressed and being witnessed by other people, then we are opening ourselves up to criticism, projections, judgment, hatred, anger, aggression, and beauty, admiration, appreciation, inspiration, activation, illumination. How many Asians can I add onto that? So recognizing it's part of the territory, and as somebody that is navigating this instead of, because I have a few friends that are big names in the world of YouTube and social media and podcasting, but they've had to turn off their empathy to get to that place. They've had to literally shut themselves down and have like elephant thick skin to not allow any of the projection to permeate them to get to the position that they're in. Now I'm navigating what feels like a new territory, or definitely not new, completely new, but a path less trod. I don't even know what the word is for that one, but anyways, trodden. Trod. Got Bernadette on the side giving me these words. Anyway, a path less walked down, let's say that, is to navigate being an external face in the world from a very deep place of empathy and sensitivity, and to not shut my empathy down to preserve myself, but to keep my heart open. It's almost like the visual of Hanuman, who rips his chest open and just bears his heart to the world. And it's like, this is who I am. These are my greatest challenges. These are my greatest gifts. These are the things that I'm working on. Please take me as my human. And here I am, because this is my devotion to the world. And so I've decided to show up in a public way to become that which I needed when I was going through my own path, and to become that which I believe that I would love for my daughter, for example, to tune into my content, or to younger women to listen to, as opposed to eating up and believing in the division, separation, inadequacy and unworthiness that is everywhere on Instagram. Like I don't want my daughter to, I don't have a daughter yet, but if I was to have a future daughter, which I believe I will, to grow up and say to me when she's 12 years old, Mommy, I don't like my nose and I want to have surgery. If I can just be one little practical solution through what it is that I'm creating into a more beautiful world that I know my heart knows is possible, then I'll do it. And that means to be a target, or to be projected on, or to be hated, or to be disliked, or to be cancelled for making a mistake publicly. At least I can rest at night going, I went all in. I went all into what it is that lights my heart on fire. I went all into showing up in my divine dissatisfaction, the amount of beauty that still needs to be pumped into this world, and just maybe making one tiny corner of this world a little bit more beautiful with what it is that I'm creating. And so what would it look like for us to be the embodiment of recognizing that beauty doesn't depend on what we look like? Beauty doesn't depend on what genetics you were given in this life. Beauty doesn't depend on how much money you have. Beauty doesn't depend on how cool your clothing are or what brands of clothing you're wearing. But beauty really is rooted in how much you love, and how rooted your decisions are in survival of the kindest, no longer survival of the fittest. Now that's the kind of world that I would love to bring children into. And if I can't do it on a collective scale, at least I can do it on a microcosm moment in my own personal reality, while simultaneously recognizing I haven't fully mastered it. Figuring it out every single day. But my life's work in the Gene Keys is beauty, and I am true to that. And also my life's work in the Gene Keys in the shadow is entropy, where I see no beauty in the world and I feel stuck and I don't want to move forward and I'm not motivated and I've got no energy and I'm in this numbness state. That is also beauty, just in the shadow aspect. But for beauty to exist, the shadow has to be present, so the energy has something to bounce off of to exist. So there is a shadow to everything, but my life's work is beauty. So I'm here to be in the exploration of what beauty actually means, and how can I create this through this platform? So the reason why, and I've said this so many times, but when I say the Blubirds, or my name is Blue, Blue is just a breakdown of beauty, love, and unity. And the Blubirds is a representation of finding what beauty, love, and unity means to you, and with your life, and with your voice, and with your actions, and with your deed, to show it in your own unique way. But it's your uniqueness that is the puzzle piece to the collective healing. It's not your sameness. It's not your mimicking. It's not your pedestaling. It's not your outsourcing of your energy or your power or blaming the world. It is through your responsibility for how you respond to the world, for how much love you allow to let in and out, to how kind you start to become in your own internal thoughts, specifically when you're going through negative emotions. And rooting your way of navigating the world from a place of survival of the kindest. And definitely not abandoning yourself in that motion. So these are some thoughts to bring us back into the podcast. I'm so grateful to be able to have this opportunity to come into my garage and to sit down with these lights and these golden hands and to share what is most alive as I continue to navigate this world the best I know how. And we are about 3 years into the podcast, and my intention is that we continue going. We go into hundreds and hundreds of episodes, that you continue to go on this journey with me as your little pocket friend. And in the same breath, to give yourself the gift of the power that is with you. That this new narrative that you're telling yourselves, we think about an average 60,000 thoughts a day. If we start actually anchoring them into a place of self-love, if we could start telling ourselves that there's something unique that you bring to the table, whether you found it yet or not, and recognize that your purpose isn't something that we attain, but it's actually just something that we become. And if we just start rooting our decisions, our actions into a place of kindness, and we ask one question every single day or one prayer, please, God, Allah, Buddha, Krishna, that cannot be named, the I behind the sun, that is greater than ourselves. Please use me of service to the greatest good of the whole. Please use me to be of service, to show me, to guide me how I can be of service through rooted in unconditional love for all beings and all sentient life. I am here to be of service. I sacrifice my own individual identity of who I think that I am into the will of the whole for the greatest good of all beings. I am here as a humble student and a humble teacher to walk this path of being human and to leave this planet just a little bit more beautiful than I found it. This is our divine responsibility. And I believe together, if we make this prayer, we can do it. Through our uniqueness, through our vulnerability, through our heart, and through the equality of all beings. So that is the intention for this podcast as we gear back up for bringing more episodes to you every single week. And I want to finish it on just a big thank you and a big gratitude to each and every one of you for your love, for your sharing, for the moments that you tag me on Instagram and you tag the podcast and you share it with your friends and you share it with your mother and you share it with your lover and you feel the resonance. It's because of you that the podcast is growing. And I am eternally, eternally grateful for you. So if you ever see me out in public, if you ever see me randomly in aisle 2 of the grocery store, come over and give me a hug. It brings me so much joy. It lights up my heart on fire to just be able to have those sweet little moments, because in this present reality, I'm sitting behind the camera. It is a lifeless black lens that I am staring into. I'm sitting here with one other person in the room. Once we are done, she is literally going to take the memory card out the back of the camera, load it up, send it over to our sister Nicola, who's going to start editing and tweaking it. Eventually, over like however long it takes to turn the video around, I get all the assets in my inbox, and then I just post it on Instagram and share that there's a new episode live, and then I go on to the next one. I don't feel the personal connections, the moments where your life has changed because of the content that has been shared, unless you tell me when I see you in person, because life has brought us together for some beautiful synchronistic moments. So don't let those moments pass you by. It brings me so much joy. And I am, eternally grateful for each and every one of you. So thank you for tuning in. If you resonated with today's episode, then go ahead and share it on your stories, tag other people if there's something that you feel like would be powerful to be shared. And until next week, until the next episode, I'm sending you so much love into your heart, into this moment, whatever it is that you're doing outside of listening to this podcast. May your mundane moments be filled with magic. May Spirit continuously speak to you, whether it's through angel numbers or beautiful moments of hummingbirds or animals that fly across your path. May you remember the gift of what it means to be alive. May you activate your uniqueness in a place where you can share that with others from a place of joy, highest excitement. And may you continue to find the curiosity of what lights your heart up on fire, recognizing that none of us really fully know what the truth is, but we all know what love feels like. And may we be a conduit of bringing more of that into the world. Sending you so much love, and until next week, blessings.